Sup you beautiful people. Hope you've had a fantastic day. Welcome back to another new episode of What If Deku joined the League of Villains. If you guys enjoyed this what if, comment down below and let me know. And go ahead and check out other what ifs in the channel after watching this video. Before we get into it though, don't forget to subscribe and leave a like, and also share this video with your friends. So let's start this video. Dabi didn't know how to react to the person sitting in front of him. Of all the people he expected to meet during his incarceration, Inko Midoriya wasn't one of them. I came here to ask you some questions about my son, she stated clearly. Dabi frowned. Why you just ask him yourself? He responded confused. You are his mother. Inko sighed. She knew this would be difficult for anyone to understand. True, but what I want to know can only be answered by someone who knew him, she explained. Dabi immediately understood that she wanted the opinion of someone who knew him while he was in the league. And since he was the only one available, it made sense. Inko looked at him seriously. During the time you and Izuku knew each other in the league, what sort of person was he? She asked. Dabi thought about this for a few seconds. It wasn't that hard to answer. Honestly, he was probably the nicest member in the league, next to Twice, he replied. He was polite to everyone he encountered. He didn't judge. He wasn't an asshole. He got on well with most of us, and was capable of making us like him without trying. Inko was a little, but not completely surprised at that information. Izuku had always been a kind boy. It was nice to know that that hadn't changed while he was away. He was definitely one of the saner members of the league, alongside Kurogiri and Compress, Dabi declared. Barring when he performed quirk analysis on some of us. Inko stared at him blankly. He started muttering a lot and very quickly about how your quirks worked, what they were capable of, and how they could be improved, didn't he? Inko deadpanned. Dabi's eyes widened, and that was all the proof Inko needed. Yeah, he does that. Every time he sees a quirk, specifically a hero's, he starts taking detailed notes on it, she explained. He's done it since he was very young. Though she would never say it, Izuku's habit was the one thing she disliked about her son, mostly because it was creepy. I see, Dabi murmured. Deku had told him that quirk analysis was a hobby of his, though it seemed like more than that. Despite these things, he could be aggressive when he wanted to, Dabi continued. If someone tried to harm him, he would fight back without the slightest bit of mercy. Inko's eyes narrowed. That was different to the Izuku she knew from a year ago. Her reaction did not go unnoticed. It makes sense if you think about, considering where he was and who he was with, Dabi reasoned, catching Inko's attention. As I said before, not everyone in the league liked Deku. Muscular hated him and wanted to break him. Moonfish stated several times he wanted to eat the guy's flesh. Toga was tempted to stab him for blood at the start, until he made her back off, and she changed to getting along with him. The list goes on. Did he get hurt? Inko asked, concerned. Dabi thought about this. Sometimes he'd get a scratch or bruise, but not much more than that. And those who did it often ended up with some in return, he answered. Inko didn't say anything. She believed it was for the best that her son had done what he had done to defend himself. Still, he had a unique presence around us, Dabi murmured. I don't know how to describe it, but the way he was, the way he treated and interacted with us. It was like he shone a bright in that place of darkness, making it brighter for everyone. Inko was intrigued by what she was hearing. Just what had Izuku done? She then noticed that Dabi, without realizing it, had begun to smile. For me, it felt nice, he revealed. It was so different from what I was used to in my life. Inko could detect a hint of sadness in his voice while he said all that. Part of her couldn't help but wonder what had driven a man like him to become a villain. She was starting to think the same about all villains. Would they like her son? People wronged and pushed so far that they became the way they are now to get a better life. She didn't know. She did, however, decide to ask a different and slightly more personal question. How did you and Izuku meet? She asked. I remember at the hospital you mentioned you liked him the most out of all the league. Were you close? Close enough, he answered. We got along because we were saner than most members, and it was easier to talk with one another. As for how we met, well, me and Toga came to join the league after being inspired by Stain. We got into a bit of a fight with Shigaraki at the start, which was stopped by Kurogiri. That's when Deku showed up. I recognize him as the one who fought alongside Stain and Hosu. He didn't stay long though, he left to go find Shigaraki. I joined along with Toga, and we had our first official conversation days later. Flashback. It was 3 days after he and Toga had joined the league that Dabi and Izuku spoke for the first actual time. Dabi was at the bar to check up on any news, only to be returned with plans were in motion. Apparently, they were on standby for the moment. And by they he meant the other villains that had joined this little group. It was starting off small but was steadily growing bit by bit. Today it was just Dabi there, along with Kurogiri, who was working at the bar. He was watching the news when Izuku came in, having finished his daily work. He sat down a seat away from Dabi and ordered a Lucozade from Kurogiri, who served it quickly. You like that sort of stuff? Dabi said before he could stop himself. Yeah, it's my favorite soft drink, he replied calmly, not looking up. Why? Got a problem with that? Dabi chuckled. Not at all. Just curious. My favorite is 7-Up, he responded. That's when Izuku looked at him for the first time. Dabi, isn't it? he addressed. That's my name. And yours is Deku, he replied. Well, your villain name at least. Izuku took a sip of his Lucozade. Pleasure to officially meet you, considering how our first meeting went, Izuku said. I guess. Though that was mostly Shigaraki's fault for having a tantrum, Dabi stated. Speaking of which, I don't know what you said to make him grow up, but good job. He came back a new man with a creed worth following. The guy's got conviction, I'll give him that. Izuku took another sip of his drink. He then hummed softly in agreement. How did someone as young as you get driven to this life? Dabi asked suddenly. I could ask you the same thing, Izuku softly retorted. You don't appear that much older than me. Looks can be deceiving, Dabi pointed out. But they can, Izuku agreed. But my point still stands. Dabi glanced at him amused. Fine, I'm 22, Dabi admitted. As for how I became this way, well, that's something I'll only tell when I want people to know. I see, Izuku acknowledged. I'm 15. That surprised Dabi, who hadn't thought he was that young. However, that only made him curious. I know this isn't fair, but how did this happen to you? Dabi asked. Kurogiri said they took you in when you were on the verge of death. Izuku shrugged. That's more or less accurate, Izuku stated. They found me at the exact moment when I was about to die. How did that happen? Dabi asked, not giving up. Someone tried off you. Or were you caught in an accident? Izuku stopped drinking and stared at the counter. Sort of the first one, he admitted. Dabi was really curious now. Who? A regular mugger or someone trying to rob you? He pressed. Myself, Izuku answered in an emotionless tone. Dabi froze. He hadn't been expecting that kind of response. Also, the way Izuku spoke about it like it was nothing, unnerved him. Rather than just give you my entire life story, I'll just give you a summary, Izuku said. To start, Dabi, I'm quirkless. That surprised him more than anything. This was the same kid who fought Nomu and Hosu alongside Stain and came out victorious. And he was quirkless. Dabi had nothing against the quirkless. If anything, he sympathized with their plight better than most people. Mostly because he understood what it was like to be in their shoes. Considering that information, you should have a basic idea of what I went through as a child, Izuku continued. Actually, I have a very good idea, Dabi interrupted. Izuku looked up at him with an expression that held a mixture of confusion and suspicion. Dabi sighed and began to explain. Most people's quirks show up between the ages of 4 and 7, however, there are some exceptions. Some whose quirks don't arrive until they are older, he explained. Izuku's eyes narrowed but said nothing. He'd heard about cases like this online. They were rare but they did happen. Some children don't develop a quirk until they are either 9 or 10. Some in their teens, even rare. He even heard of this one case where a woman developed a quirk at the age of 20. Mine didn't manifest until I was 12, Dabi said solemnly. But up until that point I was considered quirkless, and I'm sure you can guess what I had to go through. Izuku's remained silent for a minute. Would I be correct in assuming you were ripped on and bullied for being quirkless by your peers, and having few to zero friends, due to most avoiding you like a plague? Izuku asked. Would I also be correct in assuming you were called useless and weak by those around you? Dabi's silence spoke volumes for Izuku. It was the same for me, Izuku informed him. Every day I would come home with fresh scars and bruises. Same. I had a couple of burns with mine, Dabi said. His expression darkened. Aside from my peers, my father wasn't happy about me being quirkless. He viewed me as inferior and a mistake. He had no problem showing it, both verbally and physically. Izuku frowned. His father may not have liked him for being quirkless, but he never did anything like that. My father just up and left, Izuku stated bluntly. He couldn't stand having a quirkless child because of the ridicule he received at work. He moved abroad to get away from it all, or more specifically, me. Dabi grunted in annoyance. Adults are such dicks, he deadpanned. I think you mean most adults are dicks, Izuku corrected. Not all of them are like that. Some are actually pretty decent, believe it or not. Dabi gazed at him with a soft expression. He immediately knew who he was talking about. I'm gonna take a wild guess and assume you're talking about your mother, the parent that didn't abandon you, he said. Izuku nodded and stared at the counter. Then, for the first time since he had met him, Dabi noticed Izuku smiling warmly. She was the kindest person you could ever meet. She cared about me every day since I was born, and me being quirkless didn't mean shit to her. She loved me unconditionally and I loved her, Izuku explained sadly. In all honesty, she is the one thing in my former life that I miss. Dabi didn't know why, but he smiled when he heard that. Perhaps it was because he knew how Izuku felt. His mother had been the same as his. She never cared about whether he was quirkless or not because in her eyes he was her son. To her, he didn't need a quirk to be special, the fact that he was her child made him special already. Unfortunately, his mother wasn't the same as she once was. His father wasn't a nice person and was very abusive when it came to getting what he wanted. She was now in a poor state, locked away, and he hadn't seen her in years. He wasn't sure if he could face her the way he was now. The same could be said for his siblings whom he left behind after that incident where he was forced to leave home and survive on his own. He decided, for the moment, not to talk about his family. I suppose you're right, Dabi agreed. There are people like that. Though they're a rarity nowadays. Izuku silently agreed with Dabi's statements. People like that were a rarity. Some of the league were among that category. Izuku finished his drink and prepared to leave. He was tired and wanted to get some rest. And though neither of them had said it, Dabi and Izuku enjoyed each other's company. They felt they could relate to one another in certain ways. It was nice talking with you, Dabi, Izuku said. Let's do it again sometime. Maybe I'll tell you all about my adventure with staying in Hosu. Dabi grinned. Looking forward to it. Izuku started walking, but Dabi called out to him. There had been something bothering him about Izuku. Hey, before you go, can I ask you something? He asked. Have we met somewhere before? Dabi couldn't shake the feeling that he knew Izuku from somewhere. I don't think so, Izuku replied. I don't interact with many villains outside the league since I'm classed as a missing person. Maybe you saw me out while I was working. Maybe, Dabi murmured. Never mind. See ya. See ya. When Izuku left, it was just Dabi with Kurogiri. Dabi didn't realize it then, but he had seen Izuku before. It was in that place during that time. When they both realized it, they grew closer. Dabi was the only one to understand the hell Izuku had endured at that place. He also came to know about Izuku's encounter with All Might, as well as the boy who bullied him. Dabi also opened up a bit about the life he had led as a villain, and what drove him to it, though he never revealed his family. It's because of these things that they got along extremely well. Flashback end. We spoke more often after that. And that led to us becoming closer, Dabi finished. Inko remained silent. After listening to everything Dabi had told her, she had gotten a better idea of the type of person her son had become, and she was happy. Thank you, Dabi, for telling me all of this, she said. It really helped me a lot. I'm glad the league was there to save him from when he was plunging into despair and to help him through his troubles. I'm happy he made friends with you all. Inko wasn't afraid to admit it. Regardless of the fact they were villains, she truly was grateful to them for saving her son when others spited him, and where she had failed as a mother. Dabi raised an eyebrow at the friend's part. He didn't know if he would consider him that since he had never really had friends. I'm glad I was finally able to meet you after hearing about you from him, Dabi admitted. He talked about you a lot in the league. He said that a while back. Have you and Izuku been in contact at all? Inko asked. We talked a bit last week about his first few days at UA, Dabi explained. I especially liked the part where he got under Endeavor's skin and caused him to shit himself. The guy is such an asshole that he's had it coming a long time now. Inko couldn't deny that. She had seen Endeavor on TV and in public. She had seen the type of person he was. Unlike most, she could look past his hero status and see what a cruel and violent man he was. You aren't wrong, Inko admitted. He's rather horrible for a hero. I still don't like my son becoming enemies with him. Dabi chuckled at her honesty. Well, I can see where Deku gets his observational skills from, he exclaimed. Inko shrugged. It's just a habit I developed growing up, she admitted. It's nice to know that Izuku applied it to something. He actually considers quirk analysis a hobby, even though it's gone beyond that, Dabi deadpanned. Good thing that master of his had him develop an actual hobby, otherwise he would have turned into a total workaholic. That caught Inko's attention. What do you mean? She asked. Dabi leaned forward. Let's just say he has a gift for music. Before she could even ask, Inko's time had ended, and she was forced to leave. Dabi returned to his cell. Class 1A dorms Tuesday morning. Izuku was up again and did his usual routine. It was his second week at UA and he felt more at ease than before. Whether that was a good or bad thing, he didn't know. When he headed downstairs, he was greeted by Chako this time. Morning, Deku, she said cheerfully. How are you today? Izuku frowned at being called Deku. Was she calling him that as a nickname, like Bakugo? He couldn't understand why she would address him by his villain name, since she hadn't done it so far, and neither had his other classmates. He could tell she didn't mean it as an insult. Perhaps she meant it the way she described it during the battle trial. The Chako seemed to have realized what she just said. Sorry, it just slipped out, she apologized quickly. I didn't mean it in a bad way. I just meant it the way you said it during the battle trial. Izuku interrupted. The Chako gazed down at the floor but nodded. Izuku sighed. Look, I don't mind if you call me that. The way you mean it is different from what it meant before. Just don't call me that in school. It would probably cause people to panic if they found out there was a villain among them. He seriously doubted anyone would guess he was a villain, given that he wasn't well known, but at the same time, he couldn't be too careful. It was better than to attract unwanted attention. Chako nodded in understanding. Deku it is then. The name really does sound cute, you know, and like you can do it. Thanks, was all Izuku said as he made tea. In reality, he felt uncomfortable with what Chako thought of his name. He wasn't mad at her or anything. It was just that no one, not even himself, had ever thought of it as anything other than an insult. Why do you wish to be a hero? Izuku asked, quickly changing the subject. Chako was caught off guard by that question. That came out of nowhere, she exclaimed. Why do you want to know? Curiosity, Izuku admitted. Everyone is here for a reason, right? Chako glanced down at the table with a nervous expression. It wasn't as though she had a problem with telling Izuku why she wanted to become a hero. It was just that she was afraid of what he would think of her when he found out. If I tell you, will you promise to only judge me until I've fully explained? Chako asked. Izuku was slightly confused by the question, but nodded in confirmation. It was only fair to hear her story before making a decision. Taking a deep breath, Ichako started to talk. The main reason I want to be a hero is for the money involved, she declared. Izuku's eyes widened. He would never have guessed a girl like her would want to be a hero solely for that reason. His opinion of her slightly faltered until he reminded himself that he wouldn't judge until he had heard her full story. I know it doesn't sound very heroic, and probably greedy, but please understand, I'm not doing it for myself. I'm doing it for my parents, Ichako explained. Izuku's doubts quickly converted to curiosity. Her desire sounded different from the others. You see, my parents own a construction business, but it isn't compatible with either of their quirks, so we haven't gotten any business in years, thus, leaving them struggling on the financial end, she continued. Izuku was starting to understand her situation a bit better. She wasn't doing it for herself, she was doing it for them. That made him realize something. If you want to help them, then why not work for them? He asked. Your quirk could reduce prices on lifting heavy material. I know, right? That's what I've been saying for years, Ichako exclaimed. The only problem is, they don't want me to help. They'd rather I focus on my own dreams since it would make them happier. So, I decided, I wanted to become a hero to make enough money for my parents to live an easy life. Izuku could see the determination in her eyes when she said that. She then turned her gaze to him awaiting his verdict. It's not a bad reason, he admitted. Most generally do it to become wealthy and famous, which makes it selfish, but you're doing it for the sake of others, which makes it selfless. Ichako was relieved to hear that. She had been afraid of Izuku hating her for why she wanted to be a hero. The two ate in silence until they were interrupted by two figures dashing into the room. Isamu, come back. Koji Kota called out as he chased after his bunny. The rabbit, Isamu, did not heed his owner's call and continued running. What happened next surprised everyone. Isamu leapt onto Izuku's lap and sat there. No one said anything, they were all too surprised too. Koji stared at his pet on Izuku's lap, bewildered at what he was seeing. Isamu isn't usually like this with strangers, he thought. It was true. Most of the time when Isamu was introduced to new people, he ignored them and didn't approach them. Izuku was somewhat taken back by the bunny's actions, but didn't argue against them. Instead, he smiled at the furry creature on his lap and started petting it. Well, aren't you just the cutest, Izuku complimented. Just then, Isamu started tapping with his back left foot in the enjoyment of being pet. He snuggled closer to Izuku when he started scratching behind the ears, his favorite spot. Izuku chuckled in amusement. Do you like it when I scratch there? He asked with a kind voice. As if understanding him, Isamu tapped even faster. Well, alright then. Who am I to deny your wish? Izuku continued what he was doing, much to Isamu's pleasure. Despite his recent changes, when a cute animal came up to him like this, Izuku couldn't resist the urge to pet it. He had been that way since he was a child. Ichako thought the scene in front of her was rather cute. Things were different with Koji. As he watched the scene in front of him, his opinion of Izuku skyrocketed. Originally, he had feared the boy because he was a villain from the time of the Yusuke, one of his most terrifying moments, and a member of the League of Villains. He was even more frightened by the fact that he defeated Bakugo. However, hearing about how he saved both Uraraka and Ashido caused him to change his opinion a little. When he heard about how he helped Tokoyami, he started to believe he was a good person at heart. Now he knew for certain. After all, if Isamu liked him enough to do that, then he must have been a good person, otherwise, he would just be evil. Izuku stopped petting Isamu and brought him over to Koji. I believe he belongs to you, Izuku commented while holding out Isamu. Yes, thank you, Koji replied shyly as he took his rabbit. I'm surprised he did that though. He isn't usually so comfortable around strangers. Izuku didn't argue since Koji was Isamu's owner. I see, he murmured. I take it you're very fond of animals then. Koji smiled brightly at the suggestion. I love them, especially cute ones, he stated enthusiastically. I've loved them since I was a child. Sometimes I wonder if my quirk, Anivis, was born from my love for them. When I become a hero, I want to save not just people, but animals who are in danger as well. I want to open a shelter for them since most of my friends are animals. Sometimes they are easier to get along with than humans. I can't argue with that one, Izuku responded warmly. It sounds like a wonderful goal. I wish you good luck with it. Koji smiled again. From his perspective, Midoriya seemed rather nice. The latter was thinking the exact same thing. Ichako was just surprised at how much Koji was speaking since he didn't do much of it before. The hallways, a few hours later. Izuku was walking along the hallways trying to remain undetected by anyone. The reason, he needed to get to the rooftop. Aizawa had announced that they would have an extended lunch break due to a staff meeting, which was just perfect for him. Despite having adjusted to life at UA, Izuku had mixed feelings about the whole situation. As such, he needed to let them out the only way he knew how with the hobby Razor had him develop. He found the stairs that led up to the rooftop and quickly proceeded upwards. Upon arriving at the top, Izuku took a moment to take in all the beautiful scenery right before him. Seeing the area around UA was truly a sight to behold when you got up top. Not wasting any time, Izuku took out a small instrument that Razor had given him. It was a turquoise ocarina, a type of flute that was perfectly made. Before he could start playing, he was made aware of another presence. "Well, this is unexpected," Hitachi called out. Izuku turned to see him sitting on top of where the entrance was with a stoic expression. "Never would have pegged you as the musical type." Izuku blushed slightly in embarrassment. "It's just a hobby of mine I developed to deal with stress," he admitted. Hitachi smirked. "Well, aren't you full of surprises?" "I guess," Izuku replied. He stared at the ground for a moment before speaking again. "Please don't tell anyone about this." Hitachi raised an eyebrow. If it was a secret talent Izuku wanted to keep to himself, then who was he to deny him that? That didn't dull his curiosity though. "Sure, I'll keep quiet," Hitachi stated. "But I'd like to stay and hear you play if that's alright." The two students stared at each other in silence until Izuku finally relented. "Alright, fine," he said. "Why are you up here though?" Hitachi shrugged. "I come up here sometimes to get away from people." "Is that so wrong?" Izuku shook his head. It wasn't wrong at all as far as he was concerned, since he did it a lot during his school days. Holding his ocarina in his right hand, he remembered how he came to playing this. Flashback 6 months. It was an average day for Izuku where he performed his usual duties and was about to do training with Razor. Or so he thought. Razor marched into the room looking slightly less angry than usual. She was carrying something in her hand. "Okay, you little shit, I've decided to work on something different with you today. Something you are in dire need of," Razor declared. "A hobby." Izuku stared at her with a blank expression. "Ha," he said. "I already have." "Okay, first of all, quirk analysis is not a hobby, and neither are science experiments," Razor interrupted. "They have become a part of your job so much that they cannot be considered hobbies. What you need is an actual hobby, like music." "But I'm not musical," Izuku argued. "Yet, you are not musical yet," Razor corrected. Izuku didn't like where this was going. Razor held out her hand to reveal a silver ocarina that was perfectly made. Izuku eyed it with curiosity. He had heard about these and seen a picture online, but had never seen one in person. "Now watch and listen," Razor commanded as she placed the ocarina to her mouth. The moment she started playing, a beautiful, melodic sound filled the room. Izuku was completely entranced by the sound. He had never heard something so calm, wonderful and relaxing in his entire life. He never would have guessed Razor had this sort of talent. He literally felt like he could sit there and listen to it forever. "Now here's a melody I'm going to get you to play," she explained. "You'll play it every day until you get good at it. Understand, you little shit, because seriously, you need an actual hobby to de-stress yourself." And so, Izuku began learning how to play the ocarina over the next few weeks. At first, he found it annoying, but after a while, he started to enjoy it. Upon mastering the ocarina, Razor became impressed with the melodies he produced, so much that she decided to give him an old one of hers, so he could always play it. It was one of her rare displays of affection towards her student. Flashback end. He treasured Razor's gift with all his heart. He often played it at the bar, much to other members' delight, and whenever he felt stress. Other times it would just be for fun. Placing the instrument to his mouth, Izuku began playing a song he learned online. Insert song. Final Fantasy XIII Sarah's theme ocarina version. A beautiful sound echoed from the ocarina Izuku was playing. Before long, he was lost in his song and couldn't stop playing. Hitachi was captivated by what he was hearing. He had never heard anything so beautiful in his entire life. He closed his eyes and absorbed the melody as it played. He wasn't the only one. All over the school, students and teachers heard the song and ceased what they were doing to listen to it. "Where's that sound coming from?" All Might asked. "It's so beautiful." The other teachers murmured in agreement. "Yeah, I could dig this," Mick chirped. "This really turns me on," Midnight cooed. "Truly a wonderful surprise," Nizu declared. Even Aizawa was taken in by the sound he heard, as it was unlike anything he had ever heard before. All Might felt there was something familiar about it, however. The students getting lunch in the cafeteria or off doing other stuff all stopped to listen to the song that captured their attention. They all had similar reactions to the teachers. One student from class 1A was searching for the source as she could hear it better than everyone. "It's coming from up there," Jiro thought as she headed up the stairs to the roof. Like many, she was in love with the sound, but she wanted more than that. She wanted the source. She ran up the stairs as fast as she could. When she reached the top, she was surprised by what she saw. It was Midoriya. With his eyes closed playing what looked like an ocarina, she knew because she was into music. He didn't seem aware of her presence, though who could blame him? Like many in her class, she was curious about Midoriya because he lived a different life to the rest of them, but never actually spoke to him. She was surprised at his fighting skills, but was now even more surprised at the musical talent he displayed. Izuku continued playing for a few more minutes until he stopped and finally noticed her presence. "How long have you been there?" he asked, surprised. Jiro blinked. "A few minutes. I followed the sound from where it was originating from." Izuku wasn't entirely surprised. Considering the nature of Jiro's quirk, it did make sense. Still, he was annoyed that someone else had seen him play. "If it's not too much to ask, please don't tell anyone about what you saw," Izuku requested. "This is something I'd rather keep to myself." As someone who kept their musical talents to themselves, Jiro could understand. Sure, if that's what you want, she responded. I wouldn't tell anyone you were up here playing your ocarina. Izuku stared at her surprised. There weren't many people who knew about this instrument. I'm a musician so I know these things, she explained. Though, like you, I prefer to keep it to myself. Izuku sighed in relief. He really didn't want people to know about what he did. He was thrilled when the police allowed him to keep his ocarina when they found it. It really was one of the best stress relievers he had. If it's not too much to ask, Jiro said while twirling one of her earlobes. Would you mind playing one more song? It's just that, the music you produce is like a perfect harmony. Izuku considered this for a moment. There was one other song he wanted to play, one he came up with on his own. Alright, there's one I want to play, he relented. So, I suggest you sit up there with Shinso while it goes on. Jiro turned and saw Hitachi sitting on top, much to her surprise. He grinned and waved at her. Jiro quickly climbed up. Izuku put the ocarina to his mouth and started playing. This song had stemmed from all the negative emotions he felt throughout his life. He called it Anguish of the Quirkless. Insert song. Anguish of the Quirkless ocarina version. Like the last song, this was beautiful. Jiro and Hitachi could both sense something within it. A sadder feeling than the last one. The other students and teachers, except Aizawa, Recovery Girl and Nezu, couldn't sense it, however. Dream sequence. Izuku and his ally ran along the tunnels towards their destination. They were so close now he could feel it. All that was left to do was rescue the others. They saw a light at the end of the tunnel and dashed towards it, only to be met with a sight that would forever haunt them. They were in a wide space with multiple stone pillars. But that wasn't what had their attention. It was what was attached to the pillars that forced them to halt. They stared at the sight in complete utter horror. Izuku was so shocked he literally forgot to breathe. His ally was not faring much better. He had experienced Twisted before in his life. But this was something else. What lay in front of them was a large pile of corpses strung up and crucified against the pillars. And the most disturbing part. The corpses were all children. Dream sequence end. Izuku shot straight up panting and sweating. Unlike before, the terror he felt from this dream was overwhelming. Dashing to the toilet he vomited straight in. Izuku kept his left hand on the seat to steady himself, while his other arm lay on the ground to prevent his head from touching it. Izuku continued to pant as he struggled to remain conscious. That had been the worst dream yet, and by far the goriest. Izuku couldn't understand what was causing them. He never had any when he was in the league. Their separation could have caused them, could it? Regardless, they were happening more frequently now. They were becoming darker as well. Worse still, he was starting to believe they weren't dreams anymore. They felt too real for that. Despite that, he couldn't make sense of them, yet. Hound Dog's office. Izuku was in for another counseling session with Hound Dog. In this one he had talked about some of his time with the league. How things started off for him, why he agreed to join, the training he endured, but most of all, how he and the other members had gotten on. Ryo was somewhat intrigued by the way villains bonded with each other. In Izuku's own words, they were the outcasts of society. Aside from the hellish training Izuku went through, he didn't really have anything negative to talk about. Still, Ryo could tell there was something bothering the young boy. Midoriya, is everything alright? Ryo asked concerned. You seem troubled about something. Izuku inwardly sighed. It didn't matter who it was with, he was incredibly easy to read. Truth be told, Ryo was right, something had been bothering him lately. It's silly but, Izuku started. Go on, Ryo urged. Izuku sighed. Lately I've been having these weird dreams, Izuku admitted. They started off as mild hallucinations, but recently I'm having them much more frequently. Ryo's eyes narrowed. This was new. And what happens in these dreams? He asked. It varies, Izuku admitted. Some are peaceful, others are horrific. And they've been getting worse. Last night, I woke up sweating and gasping for air before throwing up in the toilet. Ryo's eyes whitened. Relax, I'm fine. But here's the thing. They don't feel like dreams or hallucinations. They feel real. Like I've lived them. Ryo frowned. Could they be memories perhaps? Izuku waved his head. No, definitely not, he denied. I'd remember things like that happening. Things like that. Ryo repeated. Izuku squirmed uncomfortably in his seat. Though they were just dreams, he didn't feel like describing them. You don't have to describe them now, Ryo reassured him. Only when you are ready. Izuku sighed with relief. If you don't mind me asking, when did they start? Ryo asked, wanting to get to the heart of the matter. The first one was during the hospital fight when my mom was about to be killed, Izuku revealed. Since coming here they've become more frequent. I don't know why though. Ryo frowned. That was odd. Why would coming here cause all that? For the briefest of moments, he wondered whether Izuku's memory had been tampered with. Quirks that could do that were not unheard of but still quite rare. Normally when they started to wear off, the memories slowly returned piece by piece. Afo had many quirks, so the possibility existed. However, Ryo could not fathom why Afo would ever put Izuku under one, considering the bond that existed between them. Whatever the reason was, he would have to figure it out another day. It seems we've run out of time, Midoriya, Ryo announced. Let's meet here again on Thursday at the exact same time. If you continue to have more of these dreams, please let me know. Izuku nodded and left. When he was gone, Ryo scratched his head. From his own perspective, Midoriya was making great progress. Ryo hummed softly. Should I inform Nezura Aizawa about this? Normally he wouldn't do such a thing because the relationship between him and his student was sacrosanct. However, it was evident that Izuku had a much deeper psychological trauma than other students he encountered. Still, he would need more information on the dreams and hallucinations if he brought them forward. As much as he wanted to take action, he needed more time and knowledge to make a move. The last thing he wanted was a repeat of his brother. Class 1B dorms. Things at this dorm were lively. The students were excited to have the day off tomorrow to do whatever they wanted. Though it was eventually decided that they go shopping at the Kiyashi Ward shopping mall tomorrow after it was suggested by Satsuna. One student, however, wasn't accompanying them. I'm sorry, but I won't be going with you, Nito declared, looking more serious than usual. I agreed to meet with someone else. His classmates were surprised, but some reacted differently. Who is it? Is it a girl? Satsuna chirped. Are you going on a date? A date? Seriously? Tetsu barked. Never pegged you as the romantic type, Monoma. Yeah, I would have thought you'd go out with someone like Kendo, since you two are always bickering like an old married couple, Kohai exclaimed. Some of their classmates both snickered and slightly agreed with that. Kendo, regardless of how awkward she was feeling at that statement, resisted the immense urge to unleash a full-powered giant fist at Kohai. Nito had been her friend since childhood, and she understood him better than most people, but she didn't feel that way about him. Nito remained indifferent towards their comments, which was oddly uncharacteristic of him. I am meeting a girl, but it's not a date, he corrected. She's just a relative of mine that I haven't seen in a while. There were disappointed groans from his classmates, and some walked away having lost interest. Others chatted for a bit about the trip tomorrow. Meanwhile, Kendo pulled Nito to the side and started talking. Hey, about tomorrow, this relative you're seeing, Kendo whispered. Is it her? Nito gazed at her with a solemn expression. Yes, he confirmed. It's the anniversary of her death after all. Tomorrow, while the rest of his classmates would be off having fun, he would be visiting his mother's grave. Tomorrow would make it 10 years since she had passed away. 10 years since his life had changed. He silently wondered if any of his family would show up. He highly doubted, and hoped that they would. He wouldn't have minded if his father or younger sister Kokoro showed up. They were the only people in his family that were ever kind to him. I see, Kendo murmured. And how are things with them? Same as ever, Nito answered quickly. Look Kendo, I'm feeling tired, so I'm just gonna go to bed. Before she could answer, Nito was already walking away. He really didn't want to talk about this. Kendo watched sadly as he walked off. She knew how personal and sensitive a topic this was for Nito, which is why she said nothing. Unbeknownst to either of the two teenagers, their homeroom teacher had overheard their conversation. He had been standing behind a wall close to them. As Nito hurried off, Sekijiro, Vlad, gazed at his students sorrowfully. The two of them hadn't spoken since a few nights ago. It appears Nito wanted to avoid him altogether, because he was scared of how he would respond to his outburst. Sekijiro wasn't mad at Nito, not since he spoke with Kendo about why Nito acted the way he did. Flashback. Following Nito's outburst, Kendo led Sekijiro to the top of the roof, where she began to explain to her teacher about Nito's origins. Before I start, I need to ask you, have you ever heard of the Tezuka group? Kendo asked seriously. Sekijiro frowned. What kind of question was that? Of course, I have, he answered. Who hasn't? What's that got to do with Monoma though? The Tezuka group were one of the largest corporations in Japan, as well as the world. They specialized in medical science, weapons development, and quirk research. To add to it all, they were a publishing company that created and sold much manga. The family was extremely wealthy and held a lot of influence. They were also extremely ruthless when it came to business, and rarely, if ever, lost an argument with another group. Their influence was so deep that they were even allowed to have individuals trained in the use of their quirks, so they could act as the perfect bodyguards, something extremely rare in this world. Kendo stared into her teacher's eyes with a serious expression. Everything, she stated. Because Nito is the son of the current head of the Tezuka group. Monoma is just his mother's name. Sekijiro stared at the girl in shock. When he first received Nito's file, it was in no way connected to the Tezuka group. Even his guardian wasn't connected. What Kendo said next shocked him even more. Nito is his illegitimate son, whom he had with a fellow employee, she continued. Sekijiro didn't know how to respond to that. He would have never guessed that Nito was an illegitimate child. However, if he was, and to someone from the Tezuka group, then it was likely to cause certain problems. Kendo wasn't finished. He was taken in by his father after his mother passed away when he was 6, and that's when things really turned bad for him. His stepmother and siblings, bar his younger sister, were horrible to him. They bullied him relentlessly and still do as far as I know, Kendo explained sadly. His father and younger sister are pretty nice to him, but the others are just terrible. It's why he behaves the way he does. I only know about this because he and I know each other from when we were kids. As she finished speaking, Sekijiro finally connected all the dots to Nito's behavior. The way he treated Class A, and the way he reacted to Sekijiro's accusations about being bullied just now, made sense. His family were the reason Nito acted that way. They were his tormentors, most of them anyway. Don't let him know I told you this, Kendo pleaded. And don't let him know that you know. He'll be furious otherwise. Trust me, he'll deny it no matter what you do. Sekijiro gritted his teeth in frustration. He knew she was right. Nito was too stubborn to do such a thing. Still, it made him angry, not knowing how he could help his students. The Izuka group was not one you should be enemies with, and getting any sort of dirt on them was almost impossible. At the same time, he was happy that he understood Nito better, even if it was only a little. What kind of teacher would he be otherwise? Flashback end. It truly did sadden him that Nito was too scared to come forward. Midoriya was right, it was common among victims of bullying. It was probably a good thing that he was living here now instead of with his family. He would need to find some way to get Nito to open up about his problems, but he would need to do it carefully and in a way that didn't seem like he was trying to force an answer. It was his job, after all, to save people, as both a hero and a teacher. At an unknown location. Is everything in place? Asked a deep male voice from a phone. There were 4 figures present in the room. They were a team known as the Elemental Four, because their names, appearance and quirks coincided with the 4 elements. Their names were Blaze, Aqua, Tempest, and Atlas. Yes, Master, Aqua answered. Our forces are ready, and each device is in prep. Tomorrow when the raid commences, we will not fail you. Aqua was a woman of 29 who possessed long navy blue hair that went down to her back and ocean blue eyes. She was of average height and quite beautiful to most eyes. She wore a blue cheongsam dress that was partially ripped, exposing her right leg and blue high heels. In addition, she wore a crescent moon-shaped necklace and 2 diamond earrings. I would expect nothing less from you, the voice stated firmly. However, should you fail, well, I don't think I need to explain what will happen. We've seen the bodies, so you don't, Tempest said. Tempest was a 28-year-old woman with grass-green hair in the form of a mohawk and emerald-green eyes. She was tall and her features were quite sharp. She wore black high-heel boots that went up to her knees, a green miniskirt held by a belt with a skull on it, and a dark green tube top that stretched between her armpits and just above where her belly button was. To add to it, she had piercings on her nose and belly button as well. While we are capturing individuals, as well as some valuable items at the mall, will it be necessary to capture children as well? Atlas asked. Atlas was 31 and possessed short brown hair and eyes. He was a large individual with a muscular and intimidating appearance. His expression was usually calm and focused. He wore a white sleeveless top with a hood and loose earth brown trousers. Unlike the others, he went barefoot. On his back, there was a tattoo of samurai preparing for battle. If they are 7 and above, then yes, we don't need infants doing jobs where they'll probably screw up or develop a quirk from out of nowhere, the voice answered. I've got enough on my plate dealing with Atrocity and his shitty group. I still don't get why you won't just kill him and be done with it, Blaze exclaimed. You're strong enough to do it. Blaze was 26 years old and owned long crimson red hair tied up in a ponytail with blood-red eyes. He was short and was relatively handsome. He wore a dark red open sleeveless leather vest that exposed his chest, traditional camouflage trousers and black combat boots. His left ear was pierced with a ruby earring. Across his chest there was a large scar, and on his back there was a large tattoo of a dragon. In due to time, the voice assured. The game has changed now. I can't explain why or how, but it has. Do not worry. Death will come to that group soon enough. With that, the call ended and the figures dispersed into the night to get some rest. Class 1A dorms. Izuku arrived back at the dorms all on his own. It was late, and most of his classmates were now in bed. Surprisingly, Momo was still up. She was drinking tea while reading a book. She stopped upon sensing his presence. Good evening, Midoriya, she greeted. Still up, I see. Were you coming back from another counseling session? I finished about an hour ago and spent a bit of time at the library doing homework. It's a quiet place to do it, Izuku replied. By the way, when you say still up, does that mean everyone's gone to bed? Momo nodded. They're all just getting ready for the big shopping trip to Kiyashi tomorrow, she announced. We would have invited you two only. You don't have to say it, Izuku interrupted. I know. Momo suddenly felt as though she shouldn't have said that. I'm sorry, I didn't mean, she started to apologize. It's fine, Izuku interrupted again. I'm not bothered. I'll just spend the day training, and slightly relaxing. Momo didn't know whether or not to laugh at that statement. Hey, where were you during lunch when that beautiful music started playing? She asked. I noticed both you and Jiro were absent. Jiro went to look for the source of that song, but never found it. I was in the hallways on the way to the bathroom when I stopped to listen, Izuku lied quickly. And once I started, I couldn't stop. Momo didn't doubt his story, mostly because it had been that way with everyone at lunch. The minute that beautiful music started playing, everybody ceased their activities just so they could listen. Shocking, Momo responded sarcastically. Still, there was something both captivating and enchanting about that music. Like something out of a fairy tale. Wow, people really like it when I play. It must be better than I thought, Izuku thought. Then again, members of the league really liked it when I played. Kurogiri especially, though Tomura was fond of it also. Momo finished her tea and stood up to leave. Well, good night, Midoriya. See you tomorrow, she said. Sure, Izuku replied. Momo walked off to bed, and Izuku started to do the same. Despite his talk with Hound Dog, he still couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was about to happen. Maybe it was paranoia, maybe it wasn't, but somehow, he just knew something would happen. He hoped nothing bad would happen to the League, Sensei's League, Razor, his mother and other people he knew. At the same time, he hoped nothing bad was about to happen to him. He wouldn't admit it, but he felt an odd sense of safety at Yue. Almost like no one could lay their hands on him. That didn't take away his stress though. Dream sequence. When you're feeling sad, angry or in any sort of bad mood, try singing. It's what I do all the time, and it works. Just look at how happy the others are, Utada advised. Dream sequence end. Izuku stopped walking and stared at the ground. Seriously? Another one? He thought confusedly. Why do they keep appearing? Admittedly, this one was more peaceful than the others, but a little strange, nonetheless. Singing was not something he normally did, barring that one time he did karaoke with a few members of the Vanguard Action Squad. During that time, Izuku surprised himself because he never knew his voice could sound that good. Although if there was anyone who surprised everyone, then it was Dabi. The man was a shockingly amazing singer. Upon arriving at his room, he immediately went out onto the balcony. Deciding to go with it for once, he started singing a song by a foreign artist from a few centuries ago. He particularly liked this song because of how beautiful it sounded, and because of its soothing, relaxing nature. Insert song. Confessional song by Charlotte Church. Izuku sat on the balcony while he sang it softly. As he did, the stress he was feeling at that moment slowly started to evaporate. And when he was finished, Izuku noticed a tear falling down his face. However, he could not understand why, nor could he understand the strange sadness he was feeling at that moment. Ha, he whispered. Why am I? Why do I feel? He trailed off at each question. What is happening to me? Later in the morning, Class 1A was up and getting ready to head to the mall. They were really excited about the trip. Elena was coming with them as well on invitation from Ochako. The Gen Ed girl invited some of her other friends, including Hitachi, but they were all busy. The absence of Midoriya that morning was also noted, but some just, correctly, assumed he was sleeping in, though others like Todoroki thought it was unusual. Still, it was brushed off, and the students proceeded to go on their trip. Kirishima, Fusama no means, convinced Katsuki to come along. The ash blonde had been less angry than usual for some reason. Even Shoto had agreed to come along. Unbeknownst to them, Class 1B was heading in the same direction. Meanwhile, the teachers began their security improvements of the school, determined not to suffer from any villain attacks. On the other hand, Nito was on his way to visit his mother's grave. He had left shortly before his classmates and had no desire to be late. The train to Osaka would take well over an hour to arrive. Compared to his usual casual clothes, Nito was dressed in a neater, more professional manner. He always dressed this way when going to important events, like now. Once the train arrived, he proceeded to a flower shop that sold his mother's favorite flowers. Yellow tulips, her favorite flower, were in. Nito was fortunate enough to buy the last bouquet. His mother had favored these because of both their color and their fragrance, which she described as wonderful. As Nito walked here, reminisced, as he did every year, about his childhood here. This was where he met Kendo until she moved away to Tokyo. Though they met again when his father took him to live with him. Finally, Nito arrived at the graveyard. He stood at the grave of his mother, Monoma, who passed away at the age of 36. Nito placed the flowers at her grave and stared at it. So much had happened to him recently, things he never would have thought could happen. The last year had played over in his mind, every event that occurred, he wanted to tell her all about it. Father was unable to come today, but he sends his regards and his respects, said a voice Nito was relieved to hear. Though personally, I think he should have come along with me. I'm here to offer mine as well. Nito chuckled. She hadn't changed a bit. He turned to see a beautiful 13-year-old girl with short black and blonde hair, held back into a bun in her father's eyes. In addition, she wore a traditional schoolgirl uniform. She wasn't wearing any jewelry, not that she needed to, and held an assortment of flowers in her hand. She had a warmer, more sympathetic expression than the rest of his siblings. It's alright, Kokoro, he assured her. I understand he has a busy schedule. Out of all his siblings, Kokoro was the nice one. She treated him like family and didn't give a crap about what her other relatives thought. She chose to be a better person, much to their father's delight. Although this may have stemmed from the fact that she was neglected by her mother and siblings, being the youngest wasn't easy. She spoke often enough with her father to have a positive relationship with him. She also got on well with the servants at home. His influence is what made her open up to Nito, much to her mother's chagrin. Though she could get along with her family, she strongly opposed the way they treated Nito, viewing it as unfair and unjust. Shouldn't you be in school? Nito questioned. Kokoro shrugged. I skipped to come and see you, she replied dully. Besides, it's not like anyone at home will notice or care. Nito couldn't help but agree with that statement. At the same time, he mentally prepared himself for the barrage of questions his little sister was going to throw at him in some cafe later. Enough about me, let's skip to the important part about why we are here, Kokoro declared. Walking up to the grave, they both started praying to Hana. Kiyashi Ward Shopping Mall. The mall was packed with many people today. Students from UA and other hero schools marched into the mall for their shopping excursion. Most classes, including 1A, split up to go and buy their own stuff. Some went for the music, others for gear, for food, for clothes, for electronics, and for those like Mineta, well, that didn't really require an explanation. In addition to students, there were families and friends walking around going about their own business. It was just an ordinary day, or so they thought. No one could have been prepared for what was about to happen. The Elemental Four, and several members of their group, stood waiting around the mall, each holding a device that would ensure the success of the mission. The moment the clock struck 12, the raid began. The first to activate their device was Aqua. It was a small sphere that manifested a large force field around the entire mall. It also possessed a holographic effect, so people outside wouldn't know about what was going on in here. Next up was Blaze, who activated his device from his phone. There were small triangular pyramids that emitted a signal, causing people coming near the mall to feel repulsed at being near the place. This keeps people from trying to get in. However, the downside of it all was that these devices didn't last very long, which is why they needed to get this done as quickly as possible. Tempest activated her device, which was gas bombs filled with a sleep-inducing substance to knock everyone out quickly. Utilizing her quirk, Tempest created a vortex to disperse the gas even faster. This went noticed by some people, particularly one group of students. "Everyone cover your face," Momo yelled. Her warning didn't reach everyone in time, but it did reach those closest to her. Some civilians were still standing. With Momo was Tenya, Jiro, Fumikage, Kendo, and Tetsutetsu. Not wasting any time, Momo created multiple gas masks and distributed them. "What the hell is going on?" Tetsutetsu demanded. "It's a villain attack," Tenya realized. "You've got to be kidding me," Jiro exclaimed. "Why here of all places? And why now?" "Excellent questions," Kendo stated. "We'll have to find out later though. All that matters is what's happening right now." There were silent murmurs of agreement. "Is it the League?" Tokoyami asked. "Not sure," Momo replied bitterly. "I can't see who it is." The conversation was interrupted by an unknown force that was knocking out the remaining civilians with incredible speed. Acting on instinct, the UA students brought out their quirks, and at the right moment. The first target of the unknown force was Tetsutetsu, who he attempted to punch, only to be met with steel. "Ow, shit, fuck, that hurts," the figure yelped in pain as he recoiled from the punch. The figure was a young man wearing a blue and red outfit that covered most of his body. He had blonde hair and a yellow visor covering his eyes. His voice and appearance made him appear to be in his early 20s. What caught their attention was the tattoo he had on his neck. It was of a man wearing a dark helm with armor and a scepter while surrounded by 3 identical dogs. For some reason he wasn't affected by the gas. "Who are you?" Tenya demanded. "And what is the meaning of all this?" The man raised an eyebrow. "Well, since you asked so nicely, I'm called Speed Demon, an awful name I know, but I didn't choose it," Speed Demon explained. "As for the meaning of all this, though seriously I would have phrased that better. This is a raid where we knock out and kidnap everybody bar a couple of kids at this mall. That surprised everyone present. A kidnapping operation, here and now." This didn't make any sense. "Why would you?" Kendo started before she was abruptly cut off. "That is something you will find out when we have finished up here," a female voice rang out. Aqua and Atlas appeared. Both looked calm and entirely focused on the task at hand. Atlas had already activated his own device. It was an oval-shaped portal at the center of the mall where civilians were being brought by their forces, and the Elemental Four themselves. "If you think we're going to just come with you quietly, then you're even dumber than you look," Tetsutetsu barked while punching his fists together. "We do not think you would do that at all," Atlas responded calmly. "It would be unfitting of your reputation as UA students." The students present guessed he knew them from the sports festival. "It doesn't matter if you resist or not, you will come with us," Aqua declared in a monotone voice. "So, get ready, because this is going to hurt." Without further ado, the villains readied their quirks to attack. The students, excluding Jiro who couldn't use her quirk in such a populated location, did the same. Momo handed Jiro a pole to fight with. Tenya went for Speed Demon, and the two took off running at even speed. Both attempted to land blows on each other, while at the same time blocking. "Not too shabby," Speed Demon complimented. "However, I think it's time I got serious, because if you think this is my fastest, then you're wrong." Speed Demon accelerated and started attacking Tenya with more fury. Tenya accelerated himself with reciprocal burst, but to no avail. Speed Demon cornered him against a wall and unleashed multiple accelerated punches that Tenya was helpless against. "Just so you know, this isn't personal," Speed Demon said. "It's just that if I don't do what I'm told I'll be killed, or worse." Tenya didn't get the chance to ask as he passed out from the pain. Kendo and Tetsutetsu faced off against Aqua. They coordinated their attacks and launched several powered punches and kicks at her, destroying some of the surrounding area in the process. Aqua was blocking their attacks with a water shield she conjured up from out of nowhere. Tetsutetsu thought they had her on the ropes, but that wasn't the true case. "Okay, I think I've seen enough. I'll admit, you two are talented and strong," she complimented. "Now that I'm done testing your strengths, I think it's time I ended this." Without warning, the co-op brought water from a nearby fountain and submerged the two students in it. Kendo and Tetsu struggled against the water, but it was pointless. In very little time they were suffocated into unconsciousness. The other three students took on Atlas. Even though they were attacking from different sides, effortlessly dodged them. He occasionally brought up a pile of earth when Dark Shadow attacked to block the sentient creature, but not much more. Enough of this, he declared. Without warning, Atlas stomped his right foot on the ground and unleashed 3 earth pillars upward that connected with each of the students. One of the reasons he went barefoot was so he could sense the vibrations within the earth and locate who was around him, as well as direct his powers. When the students crashed down, Atlas unleashed a wave of earth at them which successfully connected and pinned the 3 of them against the same wall. The 3 students were in immense pain. "These guys are so freaking strong," Jiro muttered. "They're on a whole different level than the villains we've fought before," Momo stated. Fumikage just gritted his teeth in frustration. He felt truly helpless at that moment. "Don't rough them up too bad, Atlas," Speed Demon called out. "You know Shiro prefers newbies when they arrive healthy and undamaged." Atlas turned his gaze to his comrade, and the second he did, Momo made a decision. She knew it was risky and dangerous, but right now she was desperate. She silently told Jiro to use her quirk to blast the rock away. Not hesitating in the slightest, Jiro complied with those orders, and used her quirk earphone jack to unleash a powerful sound wave that freed them from the wall. Atlas sighed. How troublesome. Momo and Fumikage prepared to use their quirks again, but they never got the chance. Jiro, realizing they were no match for these people, and in the heat of the moment, made a split-second decision. Whether it was adrenaline or fear or both she did not know. The only thing she did know was that if she didn't act, they would lose and be taken to a place they might not escape from. Jiro injected her earphones into the ground below and activated her quirk. The sound waves produced caused the floor the 3 students were standing on to collapse, and they fell into the sewers below. Atlas was stunned at what he had just witnessed. He underestimated them, a mistake he did not usually make. He tried using his quirk to sense them, but couldn't detect any movement. Whether they were dead or unconscious he didn't know, nor did he care. The only thing that mattered was completing the mission. Deep in the sewers the students had just woken up and were aching in pain. "Jiro, what did you do?" Fumikage demanded. Jiro stared at the ground miserably. "The only thing I could. We were never gonna beat them, we needed to get away." "But our classmates," Tokoyami argued. "Before things could escalate," Momo intervened. "Now isn't the time to be arguing amongst ourselves," she reasoned. "We need to get back and inform the heroes. If we don't, then our classmates are lost for good." Tokoyami stared at the ground grudgingly but agreed, nonetheless. The 3 of them started walking, trying to find a way out. As they walked, Jiro could feel nothing but despair at how useless she had been in this situation, as well as an immense swarm of guilt for leaving her classmates behind. UA entrance. Izuku was just coming back from the gym. He had a lot of stress he needed to work off when he noticed 3 familiar figures at the entrance. It was Momo, Jiro and Fumikage. His clothes were filthy and were looking both exhausted and injured. Jiro noticed him first. "Please, help us," she called out in a ragged voice. It was then that she and her companions collapsed. Thanks for listening. I do hope you enjoyed. If you want the next part of this video, like, subscribe and comment down below, and turn on the bell notification. And also check out other videos that I have created and enjoy. See you in the next video. Peace.